But right now, we focus on President-elect Donald Trump and his call for mass deportations. Programs that offer temporary protection for immigrants might also be at risk. One major concern centers on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Immigration attorneys have been very busy preparing for the possibility of large-scale workplace raids, some roundups in communities throughout the 5 boroughs and beyond. Joining us this morning, our good friend here on Tiempo, Steve Maggi, to break it all down. Steve, un placer. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Steve, let me ask you, and let's turn down the rhetoric and the concern here for just a little bit, because I know that a large part of the focus is on the deportation of migrant criminals. And by criminals, Steve, we mean people who were criminals before they arrived here in the United States. They were criminals back home. I know that the new administration wants to focus on the deportation of those people specifically. Why would anyone be opposed to that?
I don't think anyone, including myself, would be opposed to that. Those are individuals that would not have been admissible if they went through a regular application process in the first place. But it is rhetoric, like you said, because this is the same speech that we've heard in the past, and it's very difficult to prioritize specific individuals that are not already in the system. So this is something we've heard before. The question is, how can this be implemented? Is it realistic?
With people who have known affiliations to gangs, would that be a place to start?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. I think that this is where the US government is going to have to deploy all its resources and bring in all the other departments and agencies to collaborate in order to target those specific individuals. I think the fear that I've heard that, from my constituents and clients is, will this affect me? And these are just the normal people, right? Not the ones who have committed crimes. But the way that President Trump has spoken about this, it sounds like mass deportations does not apply just to criminals. We're talking about maybe 1% or less of immigrants have any sort of criminal record or have committed any crimes at all besides their immigration infractions. And so we're really talking about a small percentage, a very small percentage of people. Mass deportations connote something else. When they talk about 1 million people a year to be deported, that is clearly encompasses more than just those who have committed criminal acts.
So how do you respond to your clients when they're the ones who are asking, yes, does this affect me? What can you say other than maybe, perhaps?
Well, I think what we have, the difference between now and 8 years ago, is we do have 4 years of a track record of a Trump administration. And sometimes the bark was bigger than the bite. And we saw that in theory, they could have tried to deport more people, but in practice, it was very difficult to do. And we have a backlog of deportation cases already that the system does not have the resources to be able to process quickly. So how do you then address 8 million more people, or up to 12 million, depending on what source you hear, that are here undocumented, and then that percentage of those people that have a criminal background? I think it's more realistic, yes, to target and to use those resources and to try to pinpoint those who have committed crimes before and after entering the US and get them into the system. But they still have to go through what's called due process. They're still given their day in court to be able to defend themselves. And that's something that you can't really accomplish either with mass deportations. You can't just round up people on the street and put them in a truck or on an airplane without giving them their day in court.
Well, let's continue with that theory versus reality scenario, Steve, because it's one thing to say, yes, deport millions of undocumented immigrants. It's quite another to actually do it. And based on the research that I've done, most analysts say it's virtually impossible, either logistically or financially, to do that. So if that's the case, why is the worry so grand?
I don't know if the worry is based on anything but fear. Fear is the subconscious, right? It's not the conscious, rational mind thinking this through. It's someone who has made their life here. This is their country. This is their home. And now they're scared based on the rhetoric that we hear. And the words are scary. They're big. And the implications are on a massive scale. But when you look at the reality of it, how can this actually be implemented? that's how I assuage the fears of some of my clients.
All righty. Sit tight, Steve. When we come back, I want to ask you about how you and your office and your staff are preparing for what should be and what could be an onslaught of new clients. More with attorney Steve Maggi and immigration programs that may be at risk in the Trump administration. To Tiempo, President-elect Donald Trump continues to develop his campaign promise on mass deportations, and certainly programs that offer temporary protection for immigrants may be at risk. One big concern is the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Immigration attorneys have been very busy preparing for the possibility of large-scale workplace raids, roundups in communities as well. Educating us this morning, our good friend and immigration attorney Steve Maggi to break it down for us. Steve, I wanted to ask you about your opinion on the appointment of Tom Homan as the border czar. Quick background on him: 3 decades plus in career in federal law enforcement. He was a border control agent in the 80s. Why would people doubt his knowledge on this crisis and his ability to solve it?
Well, I don't think he has an experienced track record on a federal level when it comes to dealing with immigrants. His background is a little bit more militant, I guess, and it's a little bit frightening to people that think that he might be someone who can take that power and take it to the extreme. And he certainly talks a big game as well. He uses big, intimidating words. And I think he said that the first day in office for President Trump would be sort of a day of reckoning. And that has us all on our toes, wondering what that means and what to expect.
He has also used the words, or I've heard the word, zero tolerance policy that in the past sometimes separated migrant children from their parents. But based on the election night results, Steve, isn't it pretty clear that there's a fair number of Americans who might be okay with a more restrictive policy?
Unfortunately, it does feel like more people would be open to that. And I think we're going to see family separations at a level potentially that we've never seen before. And that's really frightening, especially the children who were born in the United States who have a birthright to be U.S. citizens. What happens to those families that are separated by the policies of the new administration?
DACA is one of those programs. Another one I know is near and dear to the hearts of many. TPS, Temporary Protective Status. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you've heard regarding that particular program under the Trump administration?
Yeah. TPS is one that is highly rumored to be, and I think President Trump has even alluded to the fact that he might try to stop that program completely, which is incredible in terms of its effect on immigrants. We have over 1 million people in the U.S. who are under temporary protected status, many from war-torn countries like the Sudan, countries that have completely fallen apart like Venezuela. El Salvador is the principal country. It's been in TPS for decades. It's absolutely frightening because those individuals are authorized to work, and they're such an important part of the economic and social fabric of the communities where they live.
What's the ripple effect of eliminating that program?
If you eliminate that program, then the question becomes, what happens to those that are already in the system? Do they lose their status? And then do you have to deport more than 1 million additional people who you said you were going to protect and gave them the status in order to live their lives in the United States? It's complete contradiction of the program, but it would really make a statement as to where the government stands when it comes to immigrants, even those that really need the protection.
I'm guessing that immigrant legal services are needed now, perhaps more than ever. How are you and your staff, what are you doing to prepare for what certainly could be an onslaught of new clients?
Well, we have our clientele has doubled in the past month and a half. We have more cases than we've ever had to process at the same time, and we're getting more and more inquiries about getting cases in between now and January 20th. And I would just implore people to talk to an expert to make sure if there's any remedy available for you, like an extension or a renewal or some other remedy within the immigration system, that you try to submit a case before January 20th, because we really don't know what's coming.
Appreciate the insight as always, Steve Maggi. Thanks so much for being here with us once again on Tiempo.